Hello, ladies, gentlemen, fans, viewers of the internet. You're probably wondering, why is that guy from Vincent and Adam by himself in front of the blue and black checkerboard of mystery and wonder? Well, I will tell you. So if you've been a viewer of our show, you might have noticed that Spock and I frequently talk about Dungeons and Dragons, or rather Spock talks about what a big geek about Dungeons and Dragons I am. And it kind of got me thinking, there's a lot of people out there that have started playing Dungeons and Dragons now, maybe because of Stranger Things, or maybe you're like me and you're a grown man who likes to pretend he's a wizard on the weekends.
So Ian, I want you to be Gandalf the wizard. And I said to him, you are aware that I am not really a wizard? And he said, yes, I am aware of that. What I want you to do is to use your acting skills to portray the wizard.
So anyway, I thought I might share a few things that I've learned about being a Dungeons & Dragons Dungeon Master for viewers just like you. Stick around, it's going to be great. So here we are, a few thoughts for new Dungeon Masters. One of the big tips for new Dungeon Masters is that the rulebook itself can be incredibly daunting, and it can really freak people out when they're trying to come up with new stories to run, or they're trying to make a ruling in a game. But the important thing to remember is that in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, they specifically say in the Dungeon Master's Guide, they're trying to leave as much as possible to the Dungeon Master's discretion. So don't worry about the rules specifically. If you don't like a rule, if you think it's too fiddly or it doesn't work for what you're trying to do, forget about it. So remember, the rules themselves, they usually exist for a reason, and that's to keep the game balanced. As long as the game is balanced, if you don't like a rule, throw it out. If you're unsure about a ruling, don't sweat it. Just have the players roll for it. If a player wants to use a spell in some kind of way that isn't really specified in the book, just have them roll their spellcasting ability. Maybe the magic mojo is with them that day. And also, be okay with pausing the game to look something up. Your players will not kill you for it. They are there to have fun. My next piece of advice is about writing adventures / don't railroad. Railroading is when you basically stop your players from being able to make decisions so that they'll play the game that you wrote. Now, writing adventures can be really fun and really exciting, but it's important to remember, if you're a dungeon master, you're not writing a novel. You're writing a game that's supposed to be played by a lot of people. That means everybody has to enjoy it. Now, a lot of people will tell you, don't write too much backstory, don't write too much history or lore about your world. Basically, don't do too much over preparation. I only kind of agree with that. It's perfectly fine, in my opinion, to write as much backstory as you want, as long as you are okay with your players completely ignoring it and not being interested in it. If your players don't want to do a history check about that bitchin' statue in the middle of the city that has all this history and is going to tell them all the lore, and maybe, just maybe, if they can think laterally enough, figure out the weakness of the evil villain, don't force it down their throats. Again, the game should be fun for everybody, and it's not fun, really, to have your choices taken away from you as a player. So I wrote a game that has some pretty big history and some pretty big lore involved, and for a while I sort of felt like I was railroading my players, but I eventually just had to make the decision, you know what? Whatever happens in this game, I'm just going to go with it. It's okay to write big adventures and have big ideas, but don't let it take away from your players' enjoyment of the game. My next piece of advice is about magic items. Don't give out too many magic items too early. And this is one I'm really, really bad at, because I love giving magic items out. And I love getting them as a player. It's this exciting moment of discovery where your characters are rooted in the world, and, magic items so often become something that defines the character to the player. I'm the warrior that wields this cool shield or something. But it can be really, really easy and really, really tempting to shoot your wad on the whole thing in the first couple of adventures, and then you don't have anywhere else to go from there. I did this really badly in a game that I ran, where by the time the players were at like 2nd level, they each had, I think, 3 permanent magic items on their person. And at this point, you know, for me as a DM, it's one of those things where I'm like, oh, come on, I missed that part. So make sure that you pace your magic items out and show some restraint no matter how hard it can be. Also, another little thing about magic items, it's fun to kind of create your own and to make unique specific items to maybe the characters in your game or maybe to a situation. But when it comes to handing them out, less is more. I think my 4th piece of advice would be this. Remember that you are the dungeon master, you're not the bad guy. You're not playing against the players. You're like the referee. You're the liaison for the players between their characters and the fantasy world that they're playing in. In other words, you shouldn't really be looking to punish players or be tough on them. Yes, I mean, they're playing characters in a dangerous fantasy world. Their characters might die. Their characters might get wounded. They might lose a magic item that they really like or something. But it shouldn't feel like you're competing against your players. It should more or less feel like you're in an improv game with them. It's better to kind of remain impartial rather than try to be standoffish and play against your players. I've known some DMs that seem to really get a kick out of watching their players suffer and struggle. And while struggle is an important part of any adventure or any story, it shouldn't be something that you're relishing in as a DM. You should always kind of be rooting for your players, even if they're going through a bit of a difficult stretch. Now, my final piece of advice is that whatever else you do, however else you play, remember that it's a game, and games should be fun. There's lots of people and dungeon masters and players, really, who tend to take the game a little bit too seriously. I like to think of it as poker night for nerds. Okay? Just get together, have some snacks, have a few beers, and have an adventure. Laugh, tell jokes, it'll be fun. Don't let it become a chore. Well, I hope you enjoyed some of my thoughts on being a dungeon master in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. There's going to be more to come. And check out our Let's Plays. By the way, here on Vincent and Adam, we've got Breath of the Wild. We just finished up Mega Man X and Super Mario Brothers. Please hit that like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.